perpendicular lines are lines that cross each other's paths at a right angle. Now what I want to emphasize is the major components or major characteristics of parallel versus perpendicular lines in an effort to help move us along to our next unit, which is calculating the measurements of various angles in parallel and perpendicular line pairs. So if you look at this picture here, you can see that there are pairs of parallel lines in this picture. Remember, parallel lines never cross each other's paths. Much like the L's in the word parallel, the lines will never intersect, they will never cross one another, they will never crash into each other. And in this graphic here, we can see that line ABC is in fact parallel to line EFG. They will never cross each other's path, and if they continue on infinitely in any direction, they will be parallel. Because of the way that they are continually moving, they never will intersect. However, HFBD, this line here that we see, this is not parallel to the other two because it clearly crosses the path of the lines at 2 points. It intersects at point F and it intersects at point B. So this line here cannot be considered parallel to the others. Now if we move on and we look at perpendicular, perpendicular lines intersect one another to form 90-degree angles. And if you recall, a 90-degree angle is a right angle. So perpendicular lines intersect to form right angles. And right angles are measured in 90 degrees. So in this case here, I have line AB being perpendicular to line D. And they intersect at that perpendicular point at point E, and they form that 90-degree angle, which we were just referring to as being a right angle. So perpendicular lines form 90-degree angles, and parallel lines never cross each other's paths. If you look at this map of Olean, you can see part of our great town or great city here, and you can see that several of the streets are parallel and perpendicular to one another. So if I were to analyze this map, I could say that North 6th Street is in fact parallel to North 5th Street. If I wanted to make comparisons in the way that the lines intersect one another and form 90-degree angles, I could say that Washington Street here is perpendicular to North 6th Street and North 5th Street because it intersects those streets at a 90-degree angle. There are lots of pairs of parallel lines and perpendicular lines in the city of Olean, and if you ever drive down a street, you will notice that several of the streets intersect one another at this crossing point or this 90-degree angle, this perfect corner or that 90-degree point. So in Olean, we have several pairs of parallel and perpendicular lines, and that's what makes this great town quite interesting to look at the map and see all the line segments and line points that are created in the map itself. So as a final reminder, I just want to emphasize the major difference between parallel and perpendicular lines. As you remember, parallel lines never cross each other's path. They will continue on infinitely without ever intersecting. Whereas perpendicular lines are going to intersect to form those right angles, and those right angles have a measure of 90 degrees. So they will cross each other's path to form a right angle, and that right angle will measure 90 degrees. As a final step this evening, what I would like you to do is look at this graphic. Remember, you can pause your video at any point. Look at this graphic here, or this picture here, and write down all the pairs of parallel and perpendicular lines. So I would like you to record the name of the line and record whether or not it is parallel or perpendicular to another line. For example, if I were saying that line JK is parallel to another line, I could write JK, and my symbol for parallel is just like the two L's in parallel, is parallel, and then I would write what line it is parallel to. As far as perpendicular goes, if I were saying line AB is perpendicular to something, I would write line AB with my appropriate notations. And I would say that it is perpendicular. This is the symbol for perpendicular, and I would write which line it is in fact perpendicular to. I would prefer that you do this on a sheet of notebook paper. If you have a note card at home, that is acceptable as well. But in your math notebook, ideally what I would like you to do is record all the pairs of parallel lines and all the pairs of perpendicular lines, and bring those to class tomorrow as we continue on our quest to discuss the difference between parallel and perpendicular before we get into calculating angle measurements in diagrams such as this or patterns of lines such as this. So please make sure that you record those those pairs of parallel and perpendicular lines. Bring those to class tomorrow, and we will continue to discuss the major differences between the two. Looking forward to seeing you. Have a wonderful evening. Don't forget your homework. Have a great night.